The following is a block of instruction from Joe Dawson, aka Bruiser Industries, Precision Rifle 1 class. Now this is going over precision rifle setup. Now if you have taken Joe's course before and you think blocks of instruction like this that you can view ahead of time so that you can have more time on range, if you think that would be beneficial or more videos like this would be beneficial, leave in the comments down below. But without further ado, here is Bruiser.
Why don't you guys bring it around? We'll talk through rifle setup. Rifle setup's one of those things that I think a lot of guys kind of rush through, or they prioritize in some wrong ways. There's also some information that has been put out there that is missing context. And some of this is personal preference, I want to kind of explain some reasons why some of these concepts exist. So kind of like yesterday, we talked through the flow of, we made the decision to shoot a bolt action rifle. Okay. We made the decision to shoot MIL versus MOA. Okay. We learned all the science behind it. We talked about internal, external, terminal ballistics. Okay. We talked through a whole bunch of stuff yesterday. Now we have the gun. We have the scope that we purchased in whatever unit of measurement we wanted to buy it in, preferably MIL. And then now we got to go, okay, how do I get this on here and then zero it and make it consistent with all these dials and knobs so I can shoot downrange? Okay, so the where you are starting in this is going to be your length of pull. Length of pull is the distance between the back of the buttstock and the front blade of the trigger. Okay, and that distance is based off of quite a few things. Now, I had a long conversation with Scott Peterson about this because kind of the historical context that some people are missing in some of the videos they're doing about length of pull. And so everybody's kind of seen that trick, right? The trick, I love that word, where you're going to start your length of pull by breaking your shoulder at 90 degrees. You're going to run the buttstock out until it's contacting your bicep. Okay. Guys will go, well, when do we ever interact with a gun that way? I go, never. It has nothing to do with how you interact with the gun. That has to do with the ratio of lower arm to upper arm. Okay. So when we mount a gun, we're looking for some very specific things, both in our strong side arm placement and our weak side arm placement. So we're measuring that to get that ratio of where our trigger is going to fall and that bicep as a starting point. It is a starting point. You are going to fine tune it a bit depending on how you're going to be shooting the gun, what gear you're going to be wearing, etc. Okay. So as I mount this gun, we're looking for a couple things. That ratio is what we're trying to do is, if I take my arm, okay, as we change elevation in the back of the gun, we're going to change elevation by doing what? Raising and lowering our elbows. When we historically used to shoot stuff like the M16, the M14 in prone, and we shot that super canted shot, I've seen another video by somebody go, no, that was because we used to cant our body, and that's why we had to do that 90 degrees. No, the 90 degrees is that basically if you compress your arm more than that, what does it do to all the veins and shit in your elbow? It makes it so you ever sleep like this, right? Too long, what happens to your hand? It goes to sleep, right? And you're like, ah. And you're trying to all the tingling in your hand. And so what you're doing is you're trying to allow enough blood flow while still giving yourself enough of an angle that you can change elevation and get support. The other thing it's doing is it's kind of giving you a nice starting point for your wrist orientation. Okay, what you don't want is a hyperextended wrist orientation, because what it starts to do is it starts to pull on all these ligaments and tendons in the bottom of your hand, which then plays into the tension that's put into your fingers and how your hand moves. Okay, and we use our hand for a lot of stuff on this, right? We pull a trigger, we manipulate the bolt, we do all of our controls on our scope with our hands, and so if I do this and I limit blood flow and I constrict all the ligaments and tendons in my hands, I am not setting myself up for success. So if guys go well, if I want blood flow and no restriction, I want this. And it's well, no, because then I lose the ability to change elevation and get support behind the gun. Okay. And it also makes us, we have to pull our scope that much farther back to get proper eye relief. And so I start and I mount the gun. Okay, I started with that position. Okay, as I go to mount this, I'm kind of looking for that nice 90-degree bend in my elbow. Okay, I've got a nice neutral wrist. I really don't want to exceed about 45 degrees. Okay, if I start to exceed 45 degrees, I really want to start addressing kind of how that that length of pull is set. So if I've got a nice 45-degree wrist angle, okay, and it's also placing my trigger finger in proper placement, okay. Now what is proper placement on the trigger? That's a very subjective answer, okay. So how many guys have heard, and I was taught this way in the schoolhouse too, how many guys have heard that you want to put the face of the trigger right there in the fat part of your trigger finger, right? That's it, right? Like, no, that's it, right in the middle, nice and flat. It's gonna make it so you isolate this, it's good. It's not necessarily for everybody. And it really has a lot to do with your length of pull setting and the size of your grip and where it's putting your hand in orientation to the trigger. And also what I found is, you guys ever tried to do a squat on a Bosu ball? That ball that's at a gym that's got the bottom cut off of it? What happens when you try to do a squat on it on one of those balls, right? Okay, yeah. The whole way down, your legs are firing. Why? Because you're trying to do on a spongy, rounded surface, you are trying to get straight and regular pressure. It's really hard. So now your finger's the Bosu ball. The trigger is your legs. So you're trying to get straight and neutral pressure to the rear on a really fat, meaty part of your finger. But if I'm doing a squat on a Bosu ball and I put my hand against the wall, okay, how much easier is it and how much less alternating pressures do I have in my feet? So what I find, especially on ARs, I run the trigger the same way. I tend to run that trigger right up, not trigger on the joint. I run the trigger up against the joint because it gives me a stop, and it consistently places the face of the trigger over some meat on my finger, but I put my hand on the wall. And for me, if my length of pull is set properly, basically what it does is it isolates one joint, okay? You guys will see as I grip this gun, if you guys look at my trigger finger on my AI, I can take my finger and I can lay it across both joints of this down to that one. I'm at the wall right now on my finger, on my trigger, okay? So I've got a 90-degree bend, even if I wrap my hand, 90-degree bend on this joint, that joint. So you guys ever see like a trigger weight puller, right? What shape is it? It's an L. Why? Because that's the easiest way to measure weight, trigger weight, and you're pulling straight into the rear. The more my trigger finger ends up like this and canted, you're gonna try to incorporate two joints. By incorporating two joints, you're gonna have that left to right lateral trigger input caused by the pressures. It's really hard to pull straight into the rear when I'm incorporating two joints. You're gonna end up pushing. Now, the other thing is, if I end up making my arms really fucking tight, what people have a tendency to do is then over grip. And now I'm past that joint, and now I don't have an ability to really lever on it, and I end up pushing on the side of the trigger, okay? Or they over grip, but then they try to hyperextend their finger back, and now they're pushing on the side of the trigger because they're trying to. I want this bone right here to be parallel with the axis of the rifle, because now I can isolate. If I push this bone out and try to pull because I've over gripped, I'm gonna end up putting lateral input into the face of the trigger. Now, is that stop for me gonna be the same for all of you? We all have different size hands. Length of pull is gonna determine a lot of that, but I want you guys to try to give it a try, and what you're really looking for is that's a stop for me, but I'm more worried about the orientation of your trigger finger and you trying to isolate that one joint, having this be parallel to the axis of the rifle. You've got a nice 90-degree bend in your elbow, and your wrist isn't extended or hyperextended past 45 degrees. Okay? And you guys can feel it. I mean, it's kind of like, hey, no, but if you take your wrist and you go to 45 degrees and kind of wiggle your fingers, you don't really have a whole lot of tension in your ligaments. You've got a pretty free trigger, but if you hyperextend your wrist and start moving your fingers, you're gonna feel that added tension that just hyperextending your hand starts adding to the dexterity in your fingers. And so guys will go like, well, no, but I really like to be really tight on the barricade. And it's like, dude, you're gonna have a lot of added tension into your hand. And so, yeah, on a bolt gun that has like a 9-ounce trigger, you might not have any issues. But if you start going and running like we did with scope carbine, and you really add a lot of added tension, and then you ask yourself, or at the stage, the engagement sequence, whatever, asks you to then run that gun fast, you're gonna find a lot of added tension, and it leads to stuff like trigger freeze and that kind of thing, okay? So once we set our length of pull, now we can put everything else on the gun, okay? Now, what other things might adjust my length of pull, okay? So if I'm a hunter and every fall I hunt in Colorado and I'm setting up my 7 rem mag I hunt elk with, okay? Do you guys think you're gonna hunt in board shorts and a tank top? No. You guys might hunt like that, right? Or that. Now, do you think that added jacket, sweater, backpack straps, you think those things are gonna add or subtract from your length of pull? 100%. These guys, okay, what do you think they might deploy in? Body armor. Okay, do you think that might add or subtract from length of pull? 100%. And so I watch a lot of guys, especially law enforcement snipers or hunters, they buy a brand new gun, GA Precision, whatever. They get on the gun, they set it up. They set it up in like July, August. Why? Because they're prepping for fall. Or you guys go to a range and it's an admin range. You guys are out hanging out. Everybody's got their team shirts on. Everything's in the truck. They all set up their guns. And then you put on kit and then push that eye box really far out. Every time everybody's really searching because they don't adjust their length of pull. Okay. So that's a starting point. But you guys are alter and adjust based off kind of all those things we talked about. But like I said, that when you were, somebody will go, well, that was because we used to camp behind the rifle when we shot high power or the Marine Corps qual or whatever. No, the principles they were looking for is the same. The reason they canted is because they shot an M16 or an M1A, okay? It's a big, long, heavy gun, and they didn't have that, a bipod, okay? So how did you get support on the front of the gun? Your hand. You're using a sling, you're offsetting your body, you are giving up recoil management to gain support on the front of the rifle. That wasn't it didn't have anything to do with the fact that they were setting it this way to gain the same things with their wrist, trigger finger placement, support. And actually they need support kind of more than we do because they're getting the gun on their elbow. But they gave up one thing, one of our fundamentals, to gain a couple other, or they gave up to gain. So once we do that, we start mounting our scope. We already talked about mil versus MOA and that kind of stuff. And we talked about, I talked a little bit about magnification. What a lot of guys do is they tend to over magnify. I see way more guys over magnify than under magnify, especially in PR1, because guys go buy a 20-inch 308, okay? And they go, okay, if a little bit of magnification is good, all of it's better. I'm gonna put a 6-36 on this. And they never shoot past 800 yards. Like, and I guess I know, Scott Peterson really likes his 6-36. But what I watch is if guys have it, they wanna use it. It's kind of like all your ancillary bags, support bags for barricades and that kind of stuff. If you have them, they're like, I bought it, I'm gonna use it. And they wanna use it on every shot. So what happens is like, if I have a 7-35, they have it on 35 power all the time. The general rule of thumb is, and I kind of had my own little range that I used for each kind of caliber or what distances I was gonna shoot at. I kind of stole this from Ridgeline. Ridgeline uses a number, I kind of modified it. And they say 2 times the distance you wanna shoot is kind of your starting magnification range. Like I say 1.5 to 2 times. Because I think 2 times, so what I mean by that is if I wanna shoot 500 yards, I probably want a magnification range that's in the 7 to 10 power range. If that's my 80% solution. 1,000 yards, 15 to 20 power. You can have more, depending on target size, what you need to do, how much you need to see. If I was shooting really small dots or F class or whatever, maybe and I'm not having to move, the targets aren't moving, maybe more magnification would be great. The thing is, especially as we shoot first focal plane, okay, what happens is as we change magnification, what does our reticle do? It gets bigger and smaller. And so if I have a 6-36, but I usually need about 10 or 12 power, that reticle is insanely small. Instead of buying like a 4-16, where now I'm at like 70 to 80% of magnification, where that reticle is small enough where it's not overly thick, but it's not so small that I have a really hard time reading the numbers. So I tend to buy a scope based around, if I know I like in PRS, I live between 15 and 18 power. So if I live between 15 and 18, I want that to be between 70 and 80% of max mag. Not max mag, I want that to be between 70 and 80%, because I don't like most scopes at max magnification in first focal plane, because the lines are gonna be so thick. And so if I want 18 power, I want about a 25 power scope. Because that way, when I back off, I kind of make those subtensions a little more fine. I gain a little bit of field of view, but I have it if I want it. And scopes are getting better, and we can get stuff that's like a 6 to 36 or whatever, and they're really usable at like 25 to 20 power, but that's kind of the general rule of thumb. So once we decide what magnification we want, and we talked about first versus second focal plane. We didn't do this in class. So if I have, how your scope's made up is this is an aluminum housing with an aluminum tube inside of it, okay? And then your magnification is actually adjustable lenses right here. So if I think of your adjustment lenses like a magnifying glass. If I take a magnifying glass and I go like this, and I put a ruler between my eye and the magnifying glass, and I go like this on the range, is that gonna change the ruler at all? No, it's gonna change the image of what I'm looking at. Welcome to second focal plane. So this is the first focal plane, this is the magnification, this is your second focal plane. So your reticle is behind the magnification adjustment. Now, I take that ruler and I put it on the other side and I go like this, okay? Is that ruler gonna get bigger or smaller with everything I'm looking at downrange? Yes, that's first focal plane, okay? Now, LPDOs that are like 1 to 6, 1 to 4, etc. Do I see a reason for first focal plane? No. Because how do you use them? You tend to use them like a red dot or a red dot magnifier, or you're cranked all the way to max mag. Second focal plane, the subtensions only work at max mag. What you can do is you can put up, like, how many inches did I say at 100 yards is a mil? 3.6. So if I put 7.2 inches up there, how much is that? 2 mils. So what you can do is as I back out the magnification on a second focal plane scope, I can actually, the image is gonna get the same size, or the reticle is gonna stay the same size. What's the image gonna do? Get smaller, okay? So if I make 2 mils fit inside 1 mil, okay, that's your true half power. Now, if I have a 22 power scope, is that necessarily gonna be at 11 exactly? No, which is why we check that, and then you paint marker your turret. Now what you do is if it gets half the size, you have to double all your holds. Okay? So that way you can still use it if you really wanted to. We had to do that with the second focal plane night forces. But second focal plane is not ideal. Is it something that's used a lot in law enforcement? Yes. Here's the reason why law enforcement uses it. Their average engagement distance is what? 50 yards. Okay, what are they using magnification for? PID, burning into a room. Like, I'm on the hood of a car in a well-lit area, and I'm staring into a dark apartment, a dark house, through the living room, into the kitchen. If I don't have magnification, you know what that door looks like? Black. If I throw magnification on it, now not only do I see through the living room, but I see into the kitchen, and I see that guy's holding a knife, a gun, a TV remote, a fire poker, whatever it is. Okay, I can possibly read his mouth as he talks on the phone. I can, whatever. And then as the assault team's coming up, what can I do? I can back out. What are they doing? They're dialing, because they have one engagement at one distance. Okay, they back out, they gain that field of view. But what happens is if I backed out on first focal plane, what does my reticle do? It becomes a fishing line. And now I'm back in front of that dark door. And so why law enforcement uses that, and I don't disagree, I don't have a counter argument, is that as they back out, their reticle stays nice and crisp and thick. And so now in that low light condition, they can actually use the reticle still. But guys will go like, well, but then shooting at 300 or 400 yards, or if I'm like a rural county sheriff, I'm a state PD guy, I work for DEA, and most of my job is like grove clearances. And most of my engagements are now, not engagements, but like I'm in support of guys moving through a grove and it's 0 to 500. That's a vastly different use case. And so the whole like, oh no, all law enforcement needs second focal plane, I think it's bullshit. Houston PD, when most, and they're all in town, yeah, it makes sense. Miami, whatever. But like that, if you're in New York and you do overwatches on Central Park, like, I don't know. It might be something to think about. So second versus first focal plane. In competition world of like PRS and stuff, there is no reason you should be second focal plane. None. Zero. Not whatsoever. Now, they actually make what's called dual focal plane now. March Scopes makes a scope called that's dual focal plane. So what they did is they put the duplex reticle on the second focal plane. And then they put all their subtensions on the first focal plane. And so as you zoom down, the center crosshair doesn't change size. And so it doesn't get super narrow, but all your subtensions adjust. And so I've seen them a couple times in class. I need to buy one. I'm really interested to see, because I think that kind of fixes a lot of problems, but for people like law enforcement, because now you guys still have that thick reticle, especially if you're dialing, but you have all your subtensions are going to still be there if you want to use them and you do holds. So they make a 2.5 to 15 and a couple other things. Anyways, another thing to think about, and I think March is the only one doing it, but I might be wrong. So first versus second focal plane. Now, I decide to buy what magnification I want. Okay, I decide I want first versus second focal plane. Now I got to mount it to my gun. Okay, we're all shooting bolt guns in general, except for Kevin. So historically, when I first started shooting PRS, everybody had scope rings. Like everybody. Like it wasn't the land of unimounts. Unimounts kind of came about with AR-15s or AR-10s. And you won't see it necessarily on Kevin's gun, but on AR-15 with a smaller receiver, why these started getting made is you can see it on my AX, is basically with an AR-15 receiver, okay, if you move the scope where I would get proper eye relief with length of pull, what happens is you'll end up with the bell of the scope really close to the front of the receiver. And so that front ring will start pushing onto this forward pick rail. Okay, so what happens is even on mine, this is an AI, okay, you look at these two surfaces, they're not exactly in line. So if I mount two rings on there, the ring surfaces that the scope mounts in are gonna sit like this. So what happens is if I try to mount a scope on two unequal surfaces, you create hot spots. And now you put your rings on top, you try to torque them down on an aluminum body. How hard is it to squeeze an aluminum can? You know what I mean? So now you're creating these hot spots and you're putting torque to them. You can create a lot of binding and issues inside your scope. Okay? And so what they did is that scope companies came up with cantilever mounts, which then allowed them to make the bottom surface, and they push those surfaces forward so you can get that front ring over the rail, but it's not on the rail. And then they machine them at the same time. And so they're cut even like this. And so you mount the scope in it, you can get that scope farther forward on the receiver without having to worry about being on two unequal surfaces. But what they figured out was that's a really easy and modular way to mount scopes. The rings don't loosen up as much, especially when you take scopes on and off a lot, and they don't start to do this. And you have something that ends up being something that is, if I want to bounce scopes from one way or another, I can add cant into the system, okay, on the gun if I wanted to. And so we have on bolt action rifles, we tend to have the cant. What I mean by that is mechanical cant in the pick rail itself. So when we zero, we have trajectory leaving. Okay, we talked about this on the board yesterday. What are we doing with our scope to make to zero? We're dialing the turret down. We're dialing the reticle down to elevate the barrel to make our 0 point of convergence. So if the higher I make this, what do I have to do more of? I have to dial more to overcome the height of my optic. So on something like an old Remington 700, or let's see if we have one. See on his, he's got a pretty high scope, but when they don't have like a solid rail over the barrel, historically old match rifles, they used to try to get the scope as low as possible to the top of the barrel. And so your optic height wasn't as high. Well, now with all these modular rails, and they look more like an AR-15, that surgeon's that way, this AI, I mean, most of these guns are. What happens is you've pushed the scope up. And so you're actually using up internal travel inside the scope to try to converge that. So that means you're gonna hit a point where I wanna dial to 900 yards or 1,000 yards, and your scope's gonna bottom out. Well, what happens is if I add cant, so if I mechanically start canted 20 MOA, I've now gained 6 or 7 mils of more travel in my scope because I've done that mechanically and not internally. Okay, so you've gained movement inside your scope. Now, have people said that you don't necessarily want to have cant sometimes? One, night vision devices. So historically what happened is you put night vision device in front, and if it wasn't perfectly centered, what would happen is then you cant it, and you're staring at the bottom of the image. And that's the least clear portion of the screen that you're looking at. It's really key that if you're going to run a lot of night vision, that you get the right height to collimate or co-align your scope with the night vision device. But really, as far as like different parts of the screen, if you're centered up on this actually, it's 20 MOA all the way across, so it wouldn't matter anyways, and a lot of these new ones are. But like his probably isn't. So he's got probably 20 MOA in the base, but it looks like he's got a pretty flat rail. So am I really gonna worry about if I have it on the same height, 20 MOA of cant? No. With modern night vision devices, it's just not a thing. And so, but I would highly encourage you to make sure at least you buy the right height to be centered up in the image of your night vision device. So, if that being said, if you have 20 MOA in the pick rail, this is a 0 MOA scope mount. If I have a 0 MOA pick rail, I'm gonna buy a 20 MOA scope mount. Okay, there's really no downside, and it's gonna give you more travel, especially in a gun like this that we're using for long range. So guys will go like, well, if 20 MOA is good, 40 MOA is better. Why not 60? I want that scope to do a backflip. Like, no. You'll see guys with really extreme cants on like 22s, they shoot really far, or ELR guns. But like, we kind of have this like generally accepted cant that works with inside the distances that we see for like short action calibers. So PRS, NRL Hunter, dude, you guys are good with 20 MOA. Like on some of the bigger guns, like the big AIs and stuff, you might see 30 MOA bases for like 300 Normas and stuff. But other than that, 20 MOA, you guys are gonna be fine. So I'm not saying that you guys can't run regular rings. I'm just saying, just like he's got rings. I'm just saying that like that's why these started becoming a thing, and it just ended up figure out the amount of modularity you want and what fits your use case. So obviously we can get things like diving boards and integrated bubble levels and that kind of stuff on these. So once I figure out what I'm gonna mount it in, what I tend to do is I tend to put the scope in here. I wanna start with trying to get the scope body as centered in the rings as possible. It's a giant lever, right? And so, especially if you're gonna be and grab the scope bell and move it around all the time, okay, I'm absolutely putting this on YouTube. I hate that. What happens is I wanna try to make it so I don't have this too far forward, and what happens is you create a lever. So the farther you put that out, if I put shear forces out here, I run it into a barricade or something, you're creating more tension at these places where it's contacting the scope rings. This is an aluminum body, okay? And they're not as thick as you think. And you can create a lot of issues, and I've watched a lot of scopes die on the range. So I'm trying to make it so it's centered up as much as possible, so that way I don't have this unneeded pressure creating issues that needlessly. Now, what other things are going to affect that? Things like diving boards, okay, bubble levels might move your scope a little bit, and that's fine. But what I'll do is I'll put it in there, I soft mount it. So what I mean by that is I'll put the rings on, I kind of I tighten them all, I get it. Now I'm gonna start playing with eye relief. Eye relief is the distance between the ocular lens and your eye. Okay, we got the ocular lens and objective lens. Objective lens gathers light. Ocular lens, what you look through, okay? I'm gonna put this on here and I'm gonna go to max mag. Okay, why do I go to max mag? Because your eye box is gonna be as tight as it's gonna be. The further you back that magnification out, you're gonna find a much more forgiving eye box. But right now, what I'm trying to do is, I'm gonna put this on here very lightly. I'm gonna lay behind the gun, proned out, max magnification. Okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find the eye box. Okay, so I'm gonna move that scope until that image is gonna go, okay, I'm gonna go, it's really blurry, clear, okay, blurry, clear, blurry. Okay, what I want to do is I want to find where I'm in the farthest forward portion of that eye box as possible. Okay, what I mean by that is if I go like, okay, I go, okay, clear, and I go, okay, nope, right before it starts, I want to be right there. So I move my head forward, it does this. Why? Because as prone, okay, my spine's behind the gun, my neck's like this, my head's laying right here. I'm as far forward on the gun as I'm ever gonna be. Okay, the second I do anything out of prone, what's my head gonna do? Goes backwards. So what happens is guys lay prone, they're in the middle of the eye box or in the back, and they're like, yeah, bad. And they try to go shoot off this, or a tripod. And you watch guys mount a gun, this is what you see. Roll bolt, and they go like this. Every single time. They change barricade positions, they go. Because they're pushing themselves back into the eye box. So with a scope carbine, I almost have a tendency to make myself just outside the eye box, so I have to kind of pull my head back because I shoot scope carbines so little in prone comparatively to how much barricade work and stuff I do. And it doesn't make me super uncomfortable to pull my head back slightly when I'm prone. And that way I get a little more eye box and I don't have to fight as much off a tripod or standing off a barricade. Whereas in prone, I might give or with a precision rifle, you shoot a little bit more in prone. And so I'll make sure that I'm just inside that window, comfortable, but right at the edge, that if I push myself forward much, I'm gonna start losing that. I'm gonna start gaining that scope shadow on the outside of the scope. Once I find that, okay, what I have a tendency to do, everybody likes those like Badger True Levels and all those things you mount to a top of a desk. What you guys got to realize is that you got a bunch of tolerances at play here. Okay, one, this pick rail to the scope mount to the scope body. Okay, that inside the scope body is the top of the cap actually trued with the line that's inside of it. Okay, now most good scope companies, you should be pretty fucking close. They have, like Night Force and all these companies have checks. Like they mount them in a machine and they check it and they ship it out. Or they check 1 out of every 100 or 50 or whatever the QC check number is. But what you'll run into is guys will go and they spend all the time, right? They make sure that the one on the bench is level. They make sure that their bubble level's level, and they do it all up, and they put it on their gun and it's still off. Okay. The interplay you guys need to worry about is going to be the reticle, okay, to the surface of the earth, or your bubble. The rest of it's kind of ancillary to me. I don't spend all the time, some people do, to make sure that, like, because this pick rail and this pick rail might not be exact, like, I remove that from my worry. Guys used to cant rifles underneath their scope to get them a little bit of shoulder connection and shot just fine. Because what you're going to see is that what you're doing is you're creating you have your reticle, okay, and you have your barrel. If I cant it slightly, but you're still converging 2 points at 100 yards, you're going to have very minimal input caused by the cant of the rifle. Versus if I don't have the reticle, okay, that I've zeroed, and a bubble, and I cant that, what happens is now you're putting in a lateral and an elevation input. A 1 degree of cant at 1,000 yards can equal 10 inches of lateral deviation. If I'm shooting a 20-inch wide IPSC, I just lost half the target by canting the gun 1 degree. Okay, so bubble levels are really important. I have a bubble level on anything I have a scope on, LPVO or not. Every single one. They have a bubble. Dude, they're like 35 to 70 bucks and they're small as. If that, half an ounce is gonna make it so you can't carry your gun, I don't know, man. Go play golf. So, bubble levels are really important. So we've soft mounted the scope. We found our eye relief. Okay. Now we're kind of trying to figure this out. What I tend to do is once I figure out eye relief, I'll throw a bubble level on the rail, bubble level on this, make sure those are good, tighten them down. Make sure to check your torque settings. What I do on this, I don't necessarily tend to grease it all the time, but what you do want to do is push it as far forward on the pick rail as it'll go. Sometimes I'll have a little bit of forward to back movement. What happens in a recoil is the scope's going to want to stay in place and the gun's going to want to do this. So you want that to be pressed up against that front rail, okay? And then kind of like anything, like tightening the lugs on a car, kind of make sure they all, you know, snug. Don't run all the way in and torque it. You're going to end up kind of creating some binding on the screws, okay? Kind of go through all of them so they all kind of sit. And then they should have an order. Like I think spurs are numbered like 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's the order in which you tighten them. And then follow torque specs. And then up here, on the ZCOs, something to know with the spur mounts is there's actually, the ZCOs have a really thin scope body. And so they actually have a specific way you tighten spur mounts. So you run one side until it actually touches. So you do one side and then the other side is where the gap is. So they have a solid set and they clamp this way. Whereas on like Night Forces, or you kind of want that equal spacing on either side. Some guys start doing it with like playing cards and trying to get it exact. Dude, as long as one side's not touching, you're good, okay? Go look, you're like, I got space, I got space. Tighten it, okay? Same thing, star pattern it. Make sure you don't just run one, like these three are completely loose and you run that one all the way in. Then I start worrying about the bubble. So we've set our eye relief, okay? We've mounted our scope. We decided we wanted a 1-piece or 2-piece mount. We want 20 MOA versus 0 MOA, okay? Now we're worried about the bubble. There's 3 different types of bubbles. There's pick rail mounted, mount mounted, or scope mounted, okay? And actually this thing has 2. And what's funny is, if I bubble up this one right here in the mount, actually this one's pretty close now. I have another one that the spur and this, just because of the scope body itself, like it's plumbed. This one's different than this one. Just because the scope body has, whether it's how this tightens onto the threads inside the index, like, or whatever, like it's just slightly off if I was to put like a, but this is plumbed to that. Hang a plumb bob, okay? Then what you're gonna do is I'm gonna take this and I'm just gonna back out magnification and so you can lay that line and focus on that plumb bob, 25 yards, whatever. As long as you can see it, you're good. And then this one, I like adjustable levels. Okay, if it's on the mount like the Reptilia and it's not adjustable, what you have to do is you have to leave all the rings loose, and then you have to bubble up the bubble and then turn the scope until it's plumb on the plumb bob and then tighten your rings down. I like it where I can tighten all my rings down, gun set up. And now I can make my adjustments on the Allen keys or whatever, get that centered up, make sure it's good, and then just tighten down the bubble level itself. Just be aware, like on the ones that have like the one screw, you tighten that screw down, you're gonna watch that bubble level sometimes go, and then you end up that game where you're like loosen, kind of go past, so it tightens itself into place. I mean, if you got a woo-saw at moments, you don't throw your gun out a window, you know, you do you. So, we've got all that set, bubble level set. Now, the next important thing on the scope is gonna be your ocular focus. Okay? We've got the ocular adjustment and we got parallax, okay? So we have ocular lens, ocular adjustment, okay? With magnification, parallax adjustment, elevation turret, windage turret. So the ocular adjustment on a Night Force is gonna be this ring right here, and then you loosen that and that whole eyepiece is gonna turn. It's actually my least favorite feature of a Night Force. On all the other ones you guys are gonna see, actually ZCO has it in the back, but it locks. Leupold, Vortex, they just have a ring that's at the back that turns, and then you just put the scope cap over it. That kind of locks it. How we set ocular adjustment, okay, what we're gonna do is we're gonna wanna adjust it to infinity, and stare at a blank wall, okay? And what we're gonna do is you're gonna adjust your ocular focus until you wanna see those subtensions and those lines get as crisp as possible, okay? What I tend to do is I don't do it at max mag, because what I wanna do is I wanna make those adjustments a little more fine, so it forces my eye to really focus and see the crispness of it. Because when they're really thick, it's really hard to tell if the lines are really that crisp. But when you make it a little more fine, you go to like 70 or 80 power, and you're looking at those like 0.1 or 0.2 subtensions in your scope, you're gonna be able to really see. And for some of the young eyes, what I really recommend is you go like, you find where it gets blurry, you find where it gets clear, find where it gets blurry, adjust to the middle and stop. Like, because what you're doing is your eye is gonna outrun, and it's gonna make everything look clear, and you're gonna like, I don't know. Like, I can move this thing an inch either way and it looks clear to me. And so they say to do it fairly quickly. Us old guys where our eyes slow down, like, dude, you're gonna be able to like, oh, no, that's blurry. Oh, that's blurry. Okay, cool, I'm right in the right spot. Because your eye's just not fast enough to adjust as you're making the adjustments. Then I move to 100 yards. Okay, I'm gonna go to 100 yards. Now what I wanna do is, that was set at infinity. At 100 yards, I'm gonna bring the reticle and the image to same plane. Okay, so I wanna set this, I'm gonna stare at the reticle, I'm gonna adjust my parallax until that image is nice and crisp. Okay, what you're doing now is we're setting our prescription for the reticle, and now I'm gonna fine tune it. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bag the back of the gun up, I'm gonna find a really fine, refined aiming point, okay? And I'm gonna bag the gun up, and I'm gonna pull my head slightly off the stock, and I'm gonna go like this. And watch if that reticle moves. Because if that reticle moves, you think that's gonna have input depending on how I mount the gun. Yes, that's a visual representation of parallax, okay? And so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make those fine-tuned adjustments until you take all of that movement out. You should be able to wobble your head, that reticle stays right in place. Now, some awareness stuff on LPVOs, okay? LPVOs, it's slightly changed. And this is a subjective thing depending on where you come from when you go to an LPVO, because Scott and I see it the same way. But some guys who are red dot shooters who kind of then went to long range kind of do it differently. And so you can try both. What some guys will do with LPVOs is, what do you lose on an LPVO? Parallax adjustment. So what is your only adjustment? Ocular. So do you guys think your reticle and the image is going to be on the same plane at all times? No. You are giving up. You are going to have to, at different distances, adjust your eye, like going like we used to shoot pistols, like front sight, target, front sight. Like, you're going to have to do that with a scope. And that's why guys who shoot LPVOs tend to get more eye strain than they do with the big scopes. And if you don't adjust your parallax on a big scope, you're going to get a bunch of eye strain. Okay? And so the way some guys will do it is, and I start this way and then I fine tune. If I'm moving to an LPVO, that's what I'm choosing to put on a gun. The choice I'm making is I'm gaining the ability to shoot long range, right? I'm gaining the use of the reticle. Okay? I'm not buying that for its 1 power performance necessarily. I've decided that my 60% solution is to shoot red dot, but my 40% solution, that capability I'm picking up, is that reticle. Now, red dots. Do we shoot red dots? Can we shoot red dots occluded? What I mean by is, you guys have seen that, guys do it with that pistols. They put the pasty over the top of it, okay? And guys will shoot competitions that way, right? Why? Because you're gonna shoot both eyes open, okay? It makes it so you don't stare at the dot, and you should be staring at the image, and you're placing the red dot over where you want the bullet to go. Now, on a LPVO, what some guys will do is they'll adjust it down to 1 power, and they're going to adjust their ocular focus until it's as close to a true 1 power as possible. Okay, that's where I start. That's where some guys finish. Okay, and they want that to be as close to perfect as possible. I think that's a pretty good bulk adjustment. What I do then is I then do the exact same thing I did with the other gun, because I go to 100 yards. Okay, I can't adjust parallax, so I just go to 100 yards, and then I'm going to bag the gun up, and I make that fine-tune adjustment to try to get any unnecessary wobble out of the reticle as I can. Because the thing is, if I'm running that like a red dot, I'll take some fisheye. I'll take a little bit of that because I'm looking through it anyways. I'm putting the red dot where I want it. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to have a bunch of excess parallax I'm fighting when I shoot 500 yards. Because that's why guys go like, oh, my gun shoots for shit. I'm like, dude, you're fighting parallax like a son of a bitch. Because you should be able to put a fucking pasty over the front of that thing if you wanted to run it like a red dot, just like you can any other one. And so I'll take a little bit of lack of clarity, fisheye, whatever, for that performance at high power. But again, that's a subjective thing. You guys do your use case. Once you guys do that, on the night forces, I highly encourage you guys paint marker them, okay? I tend to go through and this up, and I'll demo for a lot of classes, like law enforcement classes. I'll pull the scope off and loosen everything up and set it up in front. We are pressed for time today, so I'm not gonna set up my scope. The other thing you guys can do is once you do that is take a little bit of black electrical tape, and you guys can put a strip of electrical tape over the lock clamp itself, and that'll make it so it doesn't needlessly come miss out of a line or out of adjustment, because night forces love to do that because you have to grab that to move the magnification, and they end up going over spinning it, and then you spin it and you spin your ocular, and you're like, ocular adjustment. And we're gonna check that here later today. Now, when we're setting up our profile, I'm gonna talk through this one more time so we don't, if this is a 1.5 scope ring, that is not our optic height. Okay? I see this a lot with red dot shooters who come to like LPVO classes, is they go like, oh, my optic height's like 1.5. Like, no, it's not. Like, no, this is a 1.5 Badger, or this is a 1.5 whatever. And I go, it's not. Your optic height is from the center of the bore to the center of the optic, okay? You don't need to get, like I said the other day, I think with these guys, I said, you don't need to get like a case and put like a tritium butt plug in it and then like take a caliper and measure exactly down to the 4th decimal point what your optic height is. Get a ruler, use measure on your phone, like use your like Write in the Rain notebook that's got a ruler in it. Use your Leatherman, okay? Just measure from the center of the bore. As long as you're like 2.5, 2.75, 2.25, you're good, okay? That's optic height. Okay, moving forward from this, once I kind of set that stuff, that's when I kind of worry about this. I kind of force my cheek weld for comb adjustment. Comb adjustment, it's kind of like setting your natural point of aim. So what you guys are gonna do is just get on there and make sure that when you open your eye, you don't have any scope shadow and you got a nice clear picture. If you guys can kind of take indications that if I go like this and I start seeing scope shadow, you're gonna need to drop the riser. If you gotta kind of start going low, you'll see the scope shadow creep in, and you kind of raise your riser. If you feel like you have to be like, huh, to make the gun fit, don't, like, these are adjustable for a reason. Like on an AI, I can actually change how it mounts to my shoulder. I don't, but I can. Now, moving forward from there, single versus two-stage trigger. A lot of this is going to be subjective. We already talked about 60 versus 90-degree bolt throws. Moving forward from there, Arca rails. Okay, Arca was developed by a company called Arca Swiss in the 90s for camera mounting equipment. They used it for like high-end video production, and then right about 2014, 15. It kind of started coming into the precision rifle world. Mike Hannell, with Really Right Stuff, was an ex-Marine sniper. He's not dead. He's the president of the Really Right Stuff SOAR. Kind of started bringing it in and pushing those to military law enforcement. The old tripods we used to have were the lever lock kind of places, and they wore out and they sucked, and they were made for like 10-pound cameras. And so they really started coming in, and what they did was the tripods came online, and then Arca came online, and then guys started realizing that if they put Arca on the bottom of their gun, that allowed them to clamp into the tripod without like hog saddles, pig saddles, and all those other things that I had to carry now. And it also gave me the ability to do stuff like move my bipod rather quickly. And what And then for a while, it kind of stayed like this, which is the ARCA rail has no ARCA lock on it. This is a factory built-in, which is another reason why not integrated ARCA, when especially early in ARCA's development, can be a thing. ARCA rail, what they did is they first started, they were all smooth. And so the complaint was is they would slide. And then what happened is they came up with what's called ARCA lock. And if you look at the bottom of my bipod, yep, you guys see right here, there's a little like circle. And as I close this, that thing protrudes. And what that does is that as I lock this, it locks into that ARCA lock. And like they have Ridgeline rifles that have built-in ARCA lock, and they have ARCA lock along the entire bottom. All the Sawtooth, Area 419, Annex Defense, all the new ARCA rails all have that. And so the guys would be like, well, I don't like it. I want to do pick rail because pick rail doesn't slide. Well, ARCA doesn't either now. And then the other argument is guys go like, well, pick rail, I just like pick rail. It's more consistent. It's smaller. I don't argue that it's smaller. I argue that buy for the use you want. I like ARCA. ARCA is an 1.5 inch dovetail with 45-degree chamfers. There's a spec, right? Now, it doesn't mean that you're not gonna have to adjust your tripod every single time you put a different ARCA attachment in it. But I actually like the thick bottom because it helps me on stuff like bags, especially on barricades and stuff. The wider bottom ends up being a bigger contact patch on things like barricades, platforms, and so it helps in a lot of other ways too. Enclosed forends or night vision bridges, okay? So obviously, this is an AIAX in a 20-inch. I have my teaching gun here moving forward once I get home is going to be an AI ATXC. But guys will always ask me, because on all of my KMWs or old stocks, I have night vision bridges. And they go, do you run night vision on everything? And I go, not necessarily. And they go, why do you put night vision bridges on them? Okay, why do we free float handguards on ARs? So you don't touch the barrel. Okay, now what happens when you throw a regular stocked rifle on a barricade without anything on the barrel, but somehow we think we can grab the barrel and put pressure on it? Do you think that's going to cause a shift? It does. MDT actually did a really good video on YouTube where they shot and they put pressure on the top of the barrel of a regular thing, and they walked the rounds off an 8x11 sheet of paper at 100 yards. So I put night vision bridges on things so that I can put my hand on something and I'm not touching the barrel, so I can put downward pressure on the front of the rifle. Otherwise, you have to like run your thumb along the side to kind of try to get downward pressure. It's just something that I started doing for the competition aspect. If I'm doing a hunting rifle, like, more power to you. NRL hunter, trying to keep the weight down, awesome. Like, or buy one that's 3D printed or something. I don't know. Use something that's cheap and plastic, and that way, that actually might be a good product idea, companies. So what people do with weights is that weights on a rifle ends up being like, where's my balance point on this gun, right? Now, I'm not saying it's here. I'm saying, where do you want the balance point on the gun? If I'm going to balance on a barricade, right? We guys haven't got to class yet, but we start talking about all the principles of trying to get support, how much of the weight we want to support on the back of the gun, etc. Where's the heaviest part of the gun? Okay. So you ends up being that the rifle's really back heavy. And so what they do is they start adding weights up here to even up the balance point. And so that way, when they start throwing their rifle on bags and stuff for competitions, the gun just wants to sit and it doesn't end up being so back heavy. And so there isn't like a exact spot that's the same for every gun, because it depends on what your suppressor, your muzzle device, your brake, how your gun's gonna balance, and what bag you're putting it on. And so like this gun, I could make it so I can put it right here, or I could make it my balance points right here depending on how I put the weights. And so it really comes down to you kind of doing that testing on barricades or a ladder or something, where I set the gun there and I kind of see how it sits on a bag, and then kind of soft mounting the weights and making it so, and like Jimmy talked about this when we were talking about it, we'll talk about it in a few hours, of like how you come into a bag, how that gun likes to sit, and adjusting the weight so it sits as you mount positions in a way that's repeatable and you like. And it also has to do with a little bit about recoil management and felt recoil, but it's more about how the gun's gonna sit in all these different positions. And you can try things off, like when you push and pull off of a VTAC or you shoot off of an unstable chair, where are you putting those bags and how do you want that weight to kind of distribute itself? Does that make sense? Okay. Now, other kind of ancillary equipment on here. I shoot a very nice rifle. This is an AI. It's a really nice gun. I own an Aero Solace. I own a TL3. I own a Seekins SP10. Or not SP10. I do own an SP10, but a Seekins hit. Guys, you don't necessarily need something that's like an $8,000 rifle. We talked about our 80% use case a bunch yesterday. I watch a lot of guys really stress out because of precision rifle and the cost of it, perceived cost of entry caused by Instagram. Like he mentioned, he goes, dude, I'm sick of like throwing money at it because it's stuff I think I need when I don't know what I need yet. And so, highly encourage you guys. You guys already have gear, but don't like push your friends into, stuff just because that's what you own. Because they might be on a different journey than you. So best recommendation. Moving forward from there, we talked about suppressors at length yesterday. This is a KGM R30, great can. They make an R30K, an R65K. I run a bunch of Diligent Defense, Ableco, bolt gun suppressors. I've got some Dead Air of their new 3D printed cans. There's lots of different ways. Thunder Beasts are great cans. I'm gonna not say something and put it on YouTube, and then they're gonna get pissed off that I didn't say whatever can they bought. Any justification for buying? Buy whatever you want. Omnis Dominus. Okay. Now, other things on here that I have, bipods. I say this in other classes. There is no good plastic bipod. Yes, I said it. There's no good plastic bipod. Okay. I'm like talking to you guys and all future students. There isn't yet. As of 2025, okay? The cheapest bipod I'll tell you to buy is a Harris. The Harris does some things good that some people really like, and more power to you, find your use case. The Harris bipod speed deploys. Depending on which one you get, where the buttons are, they either like spring closed or they spring open. You guys kind of got to figure out which one you like best. They also have different ways that they close. Going up from the Harris, some guys never go up from the Harris because like it's worked forever. More power to you. What it doesn't do is some stuff that I actually use a lot, which is stuff like 45-degree cants. It also doesn't do stuff like you can't pull on a Harris. Well, you can turn it around, not in the middle of a stage without losing a bunch of time. So I like that stuff like the Atlas, the MDT, the Thunder Beast. You can push and pull on it and you get 45 degrees out of it. The Atlas Cal is probably my next recommended bipod, which we don't have one. I have one in the truck. It's basically like these Atlas PSRs or these V8s, but some guys don't like the panning feature on them. I don't necessarily either. I've never used it. And I tend to buy the wrench or the adjustment tool. I think Annex Defense makes one, a couple of people do, that you literally mount on the bottom and it has a screw and it gives you a lever to crank that thing so it doesn't pan. They also make Victor Co. and a couple other companies make tools that you can put on there so you can really get some tension on it. So you don't like have it want to cant underneath your gun. The Atlas Cal doesn't cant. It's a great bipod. But it also doesn't speed deploy. So you go, Harris is like 150 to whatever bucks. Atlas is like 200 to 300 bucks. You go up from there, you go to a Thunder Beast. Thunder Beast is about 500 bucks. I don't have the price sheet in front of me, and they're gonna be like, it's gonna be like 2 years from now, and somebody's gonna be like, it's $600. Sorry. So what I like about these though is that they speed deploy and they can go to 45 degrees. So what's nice is I can close this and I don't have to push any buttons. It just opens up. But if I want to go to 45 degrees, I still can. They're actually really user friendly. The other thing is that it still has fast opening, kind of like the Harris does. And it has the changeable feet. So I could use different feet on the bottom of it if I want to. So it's kind of like all the benefits of a Harris and benefits of an Atlas, but it costs as much as both of them combined. So it's my favorite like general use bipod right now. Going up from there, you got stuff like MDT. I like the MDT single pulls. They have some things I don't like, that like the adjustment knob up here is really hard to get tight. You kind of have to get a fucking screwdriver and like really tension on it to get that sucker tight. But super fast to deploy, and they make things called a double and a triple pull. So if you look at that bipod, it's got one button underneath underneath that pivot point. And what you do is you pull on that, and then to close it, you grab it and close it. On the double and triple pull, there's gonna be 3 of those or 2 of those, and it makes it so the bipod, for a length difference of this much per leg section, a difference of this much per leg section, you get a significantly longer adjustment. Stab it, motherfucker, with this. So this bipod is this much longer than a single pull. So whatever, 3 inches. But a single pull will only go that long. A double pull will go that long. Triple pull. Okay? But now we go $150 for Harris, $250 for an Atlas, $500 for this. These start at about $800 and they go to about $1,300. Yeah. Some other things that this does that's cool. They adjust. They got some. These are the PRS manufacturing enhanced buttons. They also, the nice thing about these is that they can do this. That also makes it nice. So even though they might be a little longer, like we had somebody having a hell of a time because he had a 7 to 9 inch Harris the other day, or the longer one, not the short one, 9 to 13 or whatever. You couldn't make it any shorter. With these, you can make it go really wide. And so even though the legs are a little bit longer, it's still usable in lower positions. You just need a little bit more wider profile. But again, they're expensive. And I have a triple pull, 2 double pulls, and a single pull. So welcome to $4,000 in bipods. Sling attachment points. So we'll talk about sling use when we get on barricades. Highly encourage you guys to get sling attachment points on both sides of the gun. I like them as far out as I can get them. Up here, I actually tend to tell guys that you kind of want to get it even with or behind your bipod. If you're going to run your bipod a little bit farther back, because what you're going to do is the sling's going to end up kind of hindering your ability to adjust that. I also highly encourage you guys, unless you have a steel reinforced sling attachment point, to buy one or use a sacrificial one. Because if you're using a QD mount on a sling, what's that made out of? Steel, okay? Or aluminum, some of them, but most of them are steel. What are your rails made out of? Aluminum. So if you constantly put a steel mount in an aluminum rail and you're putting a bunch of pressure and tension on it, eventually what you're going to do is one's going to give, and it's going to be the softer one. And so you're going to wallow out or open up the QD mount in your rail itself. So like he's got one built in, but that rail is aluminum. So like I would actually take and buy a secondary one, and I have people ask me all the time because I've got one behind one that's in the stock, and they're like, why? And I go, because that's $35 and this is $250.
So you look at the guys with the IR rail, they used to have it built in, now they have that insert.
Yeah, and so Suns does it too, I think. And they basically have threaded in steel inserts that are then replaceable. And the steel one, I've never seen a steel one actually wallow out. I will say, be careful with your QDs. QDs are something people don't, they always go like, my QD falls out all the time. I go, it's because you don't oil your QD. So how those things work is there's ball detents with a spring. And so what happens is that gets rusty or a bunch of dust and shit in it, and the balls won't return. Kind of like when it gets cold outside, you got to remind them to come out. Okay. So what happens is you put a drop of oil on there and push the button a bunch and kind of stay on top of that. You shouldn't have any problems with your QDs. If you do like most people do and you like walk around in the rain and the snow and you shoot a match, we clean this. We don't do shit to our sling. And then you put the sling back on the gun and you're like, my QD sucks. Like, well, dude, you need to like take care of that. Drop a little piece of oil on it, push the button a few times, kind of let it work into the spring. Your sling will last a lot longer. Some guys have a lot of problems with them, and 90% of the time, it's because they never took care of their QDs. Like I really I haven't had a bunch of problems with QDs, and I've used them for a long time. Like unless I was doing like helo work or something, I mean, then I would just zip tie my QD to my gun, and that way I had kind of that redundant thing to lock it in there. And if I really needed to move it or something, I could just break the zip tie. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you want to run some of those loop things, you guys will see some things I do with slings that kind of just require you to be able to manipulate them when we do the barricade class later, or when you come to a class. Any questions on anything that goes on the gun?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was curious on your bipod. Other than zero, do you keep it at the end, or
No, my bipod. If Jimmy and I shot this gun, my bipod's going to be farther out than Jimmy's. And so as we're going to talk about this in a sec with shooter fundamentals, and this kind of leads into that. But I'm going to give you guys a quick 5, and that way Jimmy can put his camera away. The bipod is going to be your primary elevation adjustment, and your bag's going to be your secondary elevation adjustment. So I want this where I can access it without having to like pull the gun back completely to me and then push it back out. So I have longer arms obviously than he does. So I can keep mine fairly far out there, and I can make a minor adjustment and pull it. But that's why you might, like, guys always go like, well, he has his farther back. Yes, I know. We're different length people, right? And so I can keep mine. And this isn't like, some of your guys' rails might be longer than mine. Like the ATX is a super long rail. This isn't that bad. You guys will see. If you want to make bulk adjustments on this as we start talking about shooter fundamentals and we start talking about bag use, I don't want to be squeezing the crap out of my bag. Is there any other equipment questions that I can answer?
Yeah, Arca rail. Do you recommend the Arca rail versus the Picatinny? Because I would Picatinny on mine. I think it clicks now as I get to shoot at. I would assume I might get. I've never done a barricade before, so I'm assuming that.
So that's a very subjective thing.
Okay.
And like Precore and those guys really like their pick rails. That's why they came up with their pick rail slider that does very similar things to Arca. The one thing I will say is Arca's not going away. And so I think it's a great thing that exists. I think it's good for a lot of guns that you might have, like an old Knight's Armament or something that has pick rail. That's what you have. You can't take it off the gun. I wouldn't add Arca rail to pick rail, but in the way of putting it on something that's M-LOK, it's very subjective and it's your personal preference. I prefer Arca because when I start shooting off barricades, I get a wider contact patch, and it allows me to then mount it into, like, my tripod does Arca and pick, but it just makes it so that all of my things I use are all in the same. My scope is Arca. My tripod is Arca. My gun is Arca. So it's just.
Can you expound on why you don't want to put an Arca on a pick?
It just makes the gun really tall.
Okay.
But something like that, I mean, but the thing is, like, if you're working with a lot of other people that have Arca rail, it's either they all change or you adapt. You know what I mean? So that's not a bad thing. It just makes your gun really tall.
Yeah, I agree.
If you found the video helpful, or if you're interested in learning more from Joe, go check out Bruiser Industries. I will link him down in the description. If you have questions for Joe, leave them down in the description. Also check out his Patreon, where he answers a lot of questions for future and past students. And if there's more content you want to see with Bruiser, let me know. Leave it in the comments down below. Wait, what do I say after that? And as always, thank you guys for following along. Make sure to like and subscribe, crunch up that bell so you get notified every time I upload a video, and I will see you guys in the next one.